immune system cannot tell the difference between a living bacteria and a dead bacteria. The immune system determines who an invader is by literally reading the barcode that exists on the surface of whatever it's looking at. LPS bacteria have a very distinct barcode. LPSs are recognized as a living bacteria by our immune system. They can't tell the difference. Why is that important? Well,
our next guest, Dr. Stephen Gundry, is by far my favorite returning guest. It is really cool when you get to interview someone you have so much respect for. It was very cool for Dr. Gundry to stop by our booth and hang out for a while at the Health Optimization Summit in Austin. He is here today to share some wisdom from his latest book, The Gut-Brain Paradox: Improve Your Mood, Clear Brain Fog, and Reverse Disease by Healing Your Microbiome.
Because root vegetables are a large part of ancient human diet, and it turns out root vegetables have huge amounts of...
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. Our next guest, Dr. Stephen Gundry, is by far my favorite returning guest. I have to share, it is really cool when you get to interview someone you have so much respect for, and even better when through the process you kind of become friends. It was very cool for Dr. Gundry to stop by our booth and hang out for a while at the Health Optimization Summit in Austin. My kids know his voice through his audiobooks, and on more than one occasion, I have heard my children explain to others why they should be careful about lectins. He is here today to share some wisdom from his latest book, The Gut-Brain Paradox: Improve Your Mood, Clear Brain Fog, and Reverse Disease by Healing Your Microbiome. Dr. Gundry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to see you again, Chris, and thank you for having me on.
Excellent. So you have we're going to talk about your story real quickly. We did talk about it in the previous episode. You have a very unique story with a surprising twist. You have a storied career as a pediatric cardiothoracic heart surgeon, which is a mouthful, operating on the hearts of babies at times. And then because of a supposed inoperable patient called Big Ed, you got an awareness that things you thought were impossible were actually possible. So Big Ed had turned an inoperable heart into a heart that did not need to be operated on. He did this by consuming some of the same ingredients you were using during surgeries to support better outcomes. You had just never thought to consume those ingredients instead of putting them straight into the bloodstream. With that awareness, you decided to go down the path of teaching people to eat better so they could avoid heart surgery. I went back to our last interview and you shared that your wife thought the idea of a heart surgeon teaching people to eat better so that they could avoid heart surgery was, and I quote, really stupid. And who could blame her? Since then, you have never looked back. At this point, you have written at least 9 books, with at least 4 of those books getting to the New York Times bestseller list, with Plant Paradox translated into 26 different languages. I don't know if all of them are.
Believe it or
not. Yeah. You have a new book. Again, it's The Gut-Brain Paradox. Before we dive into that, my first question is, are you still seeing patients 6 days a week? And do you have any idea how many people you've probably impacted at this point?
I still see patients 6 days a week in my 2 clinics in Palm Springs and Santa Barbara, California. Yeah, I still do, even on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. The only time I don't see patients is on Fridays when I'm at Gundry MD, my supplement and food company in LA. So, yeah, I just keep working.
Any idea how many people you've impacted at this point?
It's unbelievable. Even when I'm in Europe now, people will stop, and Europeans will say, you changed my life. How do you know me? Oh, I saw you. I read your book, or I saw you on the internet, and you changed my life, or you changed my kid's life. So
I did a quick little chat GPT. It's useful for so many things. it estimated that 500,000 readers of your books, I don't know if that's high or low, 15 million people kind of as podcast listeners. It's reasonable to estimate that 10 to 20 million people around the globe have consumed your content. Some number of that is going to actually have kind of listened and had a positive impact. Did you, when you went down this path, like transitioning from heart surgeon into educator, did you have any goals set in mind of what you'd like to help, how many people you'd like to help?
No, I really didn't. I really wanted to give people some usable actions to take back their own health, and so far it's it's working, and it kind of keeps exponentially growing, so that's good.
That's amazing. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the controversy your ideas tend to stir up. I spoke with one person who disagrees with your theory on lectins. She disagrees with your, and I'm paraphrasing, demonization of gluten and lectins. Her contention is that the problem is leaky gut, so you guys would certainly agree on that. And if you focus on healing the leaky gut, it would be no problem. Then you would have no problem with lectins and glutens. How do you feel about that kind of concept?
Well, people, particularly when the plant paradox came out, half of the book is devoted not to lectins, but to what I call the 7 deadly disruptors. And I think this is an important point that people unfortunately miss. Plants and animals have evolved in existence. Animals like to eat plants, and plants in general don't want animals to eat them or some of their babies, their seeds. And plants have evolved impressive defense mechanisms and proteins. Lectins are part of that defense system. Oxalates are part of that defense system. And in the good old days, we had a microbiome that was really good at eating these defensive proteins. There are bacteria that eat gluten. There are absolutely bacteria that eat oxalates. People who are sensitive to oxalates don't have those bacteria anymore. And people who are sensitive to gluten don't have those bacteria anymore. And it's a point, why? Because we've basically wiped out our microbiome with what I talk about with the deadly disruptors, like antibiotics we use that we feed to our animals, glyphosate, proton pump inhibitors. I could go on and on. And so we don't have a defense system against these plant compounds that we used to have. All I can tell you is in my published data, 100% of people with an autoimmune disease have leaky gut. And 100% of those people are sensitive to the components of wheat, like gluten, have antibodies to it. IgG antibodies, which means gluten has gotten through the wall of our gut and recognized systemically. 70% of these people are sensitive to the proteins in corn, as an example. Now, the good news is you can heal leaky gut. Most people, it takes 9 months to a year. The longest it's ever taken me is 4 years. That's unusual, but it happened. And when you heal leaky gut, all those antibodies go away. You lose all those antibodies to gluten. And a lot of my patients can successfully, for instance, go to France where there's not much Roundup and have a croissant or a baguette, and they don't react. And yet they come back over here and say, oh, Dr. Gundry's cured me. I can have wheat. I can have gluten. And they eat our sourdough wheat or whatever, and within a few weeks, their autoimmune disease is back. I'll give you an example from yesterday. One of my patients, a woman, had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, had both antibodies that mark Hashimoto's positive, and we put her on my program, resolved her Hashimoto's, her antibodies became negative. And I was talking to her literally yesterday, and her antibodies, her two antithyroid antibodies and thyroperoxidase antibodies had popped positive. And I'm going, what the heck? You're positive again. She says, yeah, I know. What's with that? I haven't changed a thing. And I said, yeah, you've changed something. And we go back and forth, something, do you eat out more? Is gluten hiding everywhere? No. So she said, well, as a matter of fact, I've been doing an experiment. I'm going, oh. She said, do you know this guy, Walter Longo? And I said, Walter Longo, yes, he's actually become quite a good friend of mine. He's the head of longevity at USC. And Walter has a product for the fasting mimicking diet, where basically for 5 days you eat a vegan, about 900 calorie a day diet. And he's done some tremendous research showing that this acts as if you've been fasting all month. And so this lady, you can buy these and she was doing it. She says, as a matter of fact, in the month before this test, I did this 5-day program. And I said, this is something I really have a fun time with Walter. Whenever I see him, I said, because it's a lectin bomb. You couldn't design a better lectin bomb than his product. And I mean this nicely because he now has actually reformulated one of his products to eliminate lectins. So anyhow, so here's a perfect example of a person who completely sealed her leaky gut, turned off her autoimmune markers, and just by eating a heavy lectin diet for 5 days, reactivated her autoimmune disease. And that's the only thing she changed.
Yeah. So a couple of things that I kind of take away there is that we've really kind of damaged the gut microbiome. And if you go to Europe and you're getting rid of glyphosates and potentially other things, then you have a much better chance of probably healing that microbiome so then can handle lectin. So her concept is kind of right. It just isn't applicable here in the United States because of so many damaging things. I want to talk about lectin bomb. Trying to increase, like if you look across the selection of cereals that are available, there's nothing good, right? And then I found one that was protein. I was like, oh, it's high in protein, and so I'm having this, and then I read the label, and it's literally gluten. Like that's the protein is gluten. I was like, oh my God. So of course I'm thrifty and I finished it and then I moved on. But yeah, there's these lectin bombs hidden all over the place. I wanted to stay a little bit in this kind of controversy. So even in Wikipedia, there's one description of your work as the quote unquote pseudoscientific lectin-free diet. In our last interview, you actually addressed physicians who don't believe in that leaky gut is even real. Does this pushback ever get to you? Is there anyone you kind of vent to or lean on when things do get to you?
Nah. I was a big disruptor in cardiac surgery. And, I invented devices that are still used in most heart surgery. And when I invented these devices, and I was, in the scheme of things, a young man, and I would present the results of using these devices at these big national meetings with grand professors. And one grand surgeon who I became good friends with eventually, Denton Cooley from Texas, one of the real fathers, giants of heart surgery. I presented this paper where I put all these fancy heart protecting ingredients backwards in the veins of the heart rather than forwards through the arteries of the heart because they had blockages. And it was called retrograde cardioplegia. And I invented a device to do it. And so Dr. Cooley gets up and says, in his Texas drawl, he says, Dr. Gundry would have us believe that we should give the heart an enema and that these solutions will come out through the lesbian veins. And It's the Bayesian veins. So, here I am, a young man, and one of the giants has just ridiculed me in front of 10,000 surgeons. What can you say? Everyone adopted. It's the most widely used device. So it's like, sure, you go, why don't people believe this? Did anybody ever watch the movie Moneyball?
Yeah.
Moneyball, where it was about the Oakland Athletics, a baseball team, and the manager, takes on this young kid who uses computer analytics to figure out, on base percentages and hitting percentages. And he basically fires all the high paid guys and goes with this computer program. And he eventually takes the A's to the pennant. And he doesn't win, but he gets them to the World Series. And right after that, this is actually a true story. The owner of the Boston Red Sox invites him to come to Boston because he wants him to become the general manager of the Boston Red Sox, highest honor, blah, blah, blah. So he's talking to this guy and he says, "Nah, you don't want me." He said, "Everybody hates me." And he says, "Nobody likes me. You don't want me here." He says, "You got to understand." He says that those who go through the wall first always get bloodied.
You've gotten a little bloody over the years.
I like going through the wall.
Dr. Gundry, the inventor of the heart enema. I think that's awesome. Let's hop into your book, The Gut-Brain Paradox. 4 of your books actually include paradox in the title. Does this word paradox kind of resonate with you? Like it keeps coming up.
That was not the original title of the plant paradox. That actually was my editor at HarperCollins. The original title of that book was The Matrix, and my diet at at my institutes, I had the list. The yes and no foods was the Matrix diet, and it was based on computer program language. A matrix is the input and output of a computer, and so and I was a fan of the first Matrix film. That went downhill from there, but they said no, the Matrix is too kind of bro. There wasn't a word for that back then, but it's too male oriented, and your reader is a 35-year-old female. I said, "No, my reader isn't a 35-year-old female."
I'm the inventor of the heart enema. How is this?
Yes, it is. The people who buy health books are usually a 35-year-old female who either buy them for their husband or their father, and that's your customer. And I said, "Yeah, but what a stupid name, the plant paradox diet." And I go, "What is that?" And they said, "Trust us, because the paradox is, wait a minute, plants are good for us, and eating plants is really great. And it's a paradox that there might be plants that do not have our best interest in mind." So that's actually where it came from.
And then it's carried through. Did you think about a different title for the gut-brain paradox?
We had 2 titles that did not use the paradox. The last 2, Gut Check and Unlocking the Keto Code. And we came back because, again, up until recently, we really did not think that these little one-cell organisms had any control over what happens in the most advanced, computer program in the world, our brain. And yet, these one-cell organisms, bacteria, have been around for 3 billion years. And they are a rather successful life form. And I make the argument that these are sentient beings. They see, even though they don't have eyes. They can count the number of their friends and their foes around them. They can make decisions to do things. based on who's around them. They can actually make compounds to save their friends, and they can make compounds that will make their enemies think twice about growing around them. So, yeah, they don't have a brain, but they clearly have figured out a lot of things. And we now know there is this incredibly complex communication system that exists between the microbiome and us. And I submit in the book that more than likely we exist as a home to carry our microbiome around to find them the foods they need to survive. And if we do that for them and we have a good mix of bacteria, then they'll take care of us. And it's a very symbiotic relationship that we've really screwed up.
Yeah, I love yes, it's a paradox because we think we're, feeding them and they're really telling us what to feed them. And I can share the first time and the time that I stuck with your protocol most diligently was actually when I flew out to California to visit you. My cravings for sweets, and I definitely have a sweet tooth, just were gone. All right. And it really is, you get the gut microbiome right, and then you're fighting yourself or cravings, or you're really fighting, you're no longer fighting the wrong gut fellows, right? You're actually working in tandem with what you call the gut buddies. Now, LPSs, so lipopolysaccharides, take a prominent role in the gut-brain paradox. You've mentioned them in previous book, but they took a much bigger stage. What are LPSs? Why do you first curse about them? You actually openly curse in your audiobook and in your book, and then at the end encourage us to seek them out.
So we've known for actually a very long time that LPSs are the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. And our immune system cannot tell the difference between a living bacteria and a dead bacteria. The immune system determines who an invader is by literally reading the barcode that exists on the surface of whatever it's looking at. And LPS bacteria have a very distinct barcode, and our immune system is literally a barcode scanner, and it reads like a passport scanner. And says, oh yeah, this is a good guy, or this guy's on the no-fly list, etc. And so LPSs are recognized as a living bacteria by our immune system. They can't tell the difference. Why is that important? Well, we can take LPSs, which are dead bacteria, and inject them into you or me, or healthy volunteers. And these people will immediately go into septic shock. The heart rate will go sky high. The blood pressure will drop. They'll get a fever and literally fall on the floor because they think there are, septic, the septic bacteria. Wim Hof, the Iceman, who I've had on my podcast, became famous, among other things, because using his breathing techniques, he can be injected with LPS and just sit there and go, yeah, so what? Ho hum. And he wrote a paper where he trained 20 people in his techniques, and they were injected with these bacteria, and they didn't go into septic shock. So these guys are nasty, and they really do create an inflammatory response in us. Whenever I write a new book, I usually head down rabbit holes, and I was very interested in root vegetables, because root vegetables are a large part of ancient human diet. And it turns out root vegetables have huge amounts of LPS producing bacteria in the soil, and they cling to the root vegetable. And you go, well, wait a minute, root vegetables are good for you, and all these people are eating root vegetables. How in the world can eating LPSs be good for you? Well, I use the example for myself. As a teenager, I had horrible allergies, ragweed, grasses, so bad that I actually had to get allergy shots. And allergy shots work by giving you tiny, tiny doses of the thing you're allergic to. In fact, first time I was tested, I went into anaphylactic shock. They had to give me epinephrine.
What's the dosing after the kid has gone into anaphylactic shock to like we need to titrate this up?
Well, yeah, you got you got to get back up even further. So so you start with these tiny doses, and then you keep increasing the dose, and the immune system basically gets trained that, oh, yeah, this isn't as bad as I thought. I'm used to this. I've seen it before. I don't have to sound the alarm, and then that's how the tolerance is achieved. So then I said, well, I wonder if that happens if you eat LPSs. And sure enough, there's a wonderful body of literature that I talk about in the book that oral exposure to LPSs trains the immune system that, hey, these guys are, ubiquitous. You don't have to worry about these guys. And then lo and behold, I find out that grain products have LPSs in grains. And it turns out that spices leaves have their own microbiome. Who knew? Beans have their own microbiome, and a lot of them are LPS based. And so I came away going, son of a gun, maybe there are benefits to these foods because of their LPS content training the immune system. Now, what I try to point out to anyone who will listen is we have always detoxified the lectins in these various foods by fermentation. And for instance, when Italians soak their beans for 48 hours, and if anyone's actually soaked their beans, they know that this scum rises to the top. And that's actually the fermentation of the beans by its own microbiome. And the fermentation breaks down the lectins. And that's what happens. I mean, the Incas always fermented their quinoa. They let it rot before they cooked it. And that's not on the package direction. The fermentation has been part and parcel of cultures diffusing lectins. But yeah, swallowing LPSs is really a good idea. When I was a kid back in the 50s and 60s, we had what was called a victory garden, which came out of World War II. And you'd go out in the backyard and you'd pull a carrot out of the ground, and you wouldn't take it in and spray hand sanitizer on it. And, you brushed it on your pants and you ate it with the dirt and everything. And who would have believed that, that's what we always did. And, we always played in the dirt and, ate dirt. And it's one of the things that dog owners have a much better microbiome, have much less asthma and allergies than non-dog owners because the dogs are bringing LPSs and other soil bacteria into the house and you.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes, send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code that'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
It has this parallel. So my wife and I have 15-year-old twins now, and I remember this moment with the pediatrician where she was like, hey, are they starting to put everything in their mouth? Because there literally is a phase with these children, right, where it's like, quick, get it in my mouth. Like it doesn't even matter what it is. Quick, get it in my mouth. And she said, okay, at this point, you no longer need to sterilize your milk bottles, right? We weren't doing that anyway. We were just washing them well, but we didn't go through some formal sterilization process. But this has to be kind of this instinctual, I've got to build up my immune system. And the opposite of building up the immune system is using lots of hand sanitizer and washing your hands too much. And what kind of impact do you think on general immune system, the pandemic and all of this cleanliness and distance? Is there any data, and what is your feeling?
Well, yeah, this was the proposal, and I'm blanking on his name, the hygiene hypothesis was that this complete avoidance of, bacteria is really led to the fact that our immune system has never been properly trained about who's good and who's bad. We've got an untrained militia, and I talk in the beginning of the book about the huge battle between the two giants of bacteriology, Pasteur and Béchamp in France, and who eventually won that battle. It was the wrong guy, but that's a great story in and of itself. But yeah, the germ theory, the germ hypothesis, became prevalent because of Pasteur winning the debate. But Beauchamp's argument was, no. Bacteria are not bad in and of themselves. It's as long as there's a balance, the terrain is in balance, then the good guys never overwhelm the bad guys. It's like a tropical rainforest. And as long as all these species are interdependent on each other, then the balance is what is important, not any specific bacteria. But it's the unbalancing of this tropical rainforest that gets people into trouble.
It makes sense. I've even, normally with lettuce that's going a little, and maybe you can speak to this, that's going a little bit bad, you might very carefully select it out or just throw the whole bag away. I think that those are actually of value because you think about how we evolved. There was a lot of rotten lettuce eaten, a lot of rotten, because that was the only food option. Any opinions there?
Well, again, it's interesting, unlike dogs, we do have an aversion to rotten smells. And so that was probably protective, at least for us. Dogs have just incredibly high gastric acid compared to us. And so they've evolved, if you will, as carrion eaters. That's another subject, but we did not do that. But fermentation was the only way to preserve anything. All of our meats had to be fermented one way or another. And I talk about what these cultures have always relied on fermentation of milk, for instance, turning it into yogurt or cheeses, fermentation of meats, turning them into sausages or hams, is the only way to long-term store these perishable foods. And it was the fermentation that was actually really good in so many ways.
It's definitely on my radar to get more fermented foods. It wasn't something that I enjoyed in the past. So I was really surprised to see Chicken in the Sea as chapter 11. So in Plant Paradox, you convinced me, and this is my interpretation, so not necessarily because I went back and looked at it, to stay away from chicken. I could not find the specific quote, but I thought you had said chicken may be more responsible for, I can't remember if it was antibiotic consumption, inflammation, or whatever, just because of the sheer volume of chicken that we consume. You described the horrible conditions of free-range chickens. I think the quote is, "It's perfectly legal to keep an animal inside a warehouse its entire life and call it free range as long as a door to the outside is open for a mere 5 minutes a day." I always joke, Bob in the back of the warehouse doesn't know there's a door and doesn't know the door's ever open, right? That's kind of, so what was wrong? So you've kind of, I don't think you've changed, but you're kind of much more comfortable with chicken under certain circumstances. So talk about that, please.
Here's the good news. So chicken, unfortunately, is just an ear of corn with feathers. And it is, you cannot, quote, give antibiotics to chickens anymore. But there's a loophole. If the veterinarian thinks, who is hired by these factory farms, thinks that one chicken in the flock of 100,000 in a warehouse, and there are literally 100,000 chickens in a warehouse, thinks that that one chicken has an infection. It is legal for him to dose the entire flock with antibiotics for that one chicken. And interesting, there's, as you know, a bit of tariff wars between China and us. And one of the things that we are adamant is that people should buy our agricultural products like beef and chicken. And the Chinese government has pushed back multiple times, saying that when they test American chickens, 60% of the American chickens that have been sent to China for testing test positive for antibiotics. 60%. And wait a minute, we don't give antibiotics to our chickens.
It's illegal.
Yeah, so there's a new herbicide that I won't talk about today, but it's banned in all countries except the United States. And because it is so deadly to the microbiome, it's a neurotoxin, it's banned in all countries but the United States. And it's now replacing glyphosate as a weed killer and as a crop desiccant because nobody knows about it yet. And I'll just leave it. It's son of paraquat, and anybody wants to look up paraquat, it'll scare you to death. But it's banned in all countries, but it's used here.
So now we're probably seeing that in our food supply.
Yeah. So getting back to chicken, the good news is, I've made a plea for pastured chicken, and that does not mean pasteurized chicken. And we are now actually seeing, even in Trader Joe's, there's now pastured chicken. And so we're getting there. Is it perfect? No. But, a plug for Farmer Dan at Lectin Light Chicken in Texas. Farmer Dan feeds his chickens, free-range chickens, pastured chickens, a lectin-free diet. And I'm a huge fan of them. It's the best chicken you'll ever eat. lectinlightchicken.com. Light spelled like a light bulb, not L-I-T-E. So we're making progress. So we're getting there.
It's going to get easier to eat healthy and have a healthy gut microbiome at some point. Lectin free. Does corn have lectins?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So because that's kind of the fallback. I found out in a blood food sensitivity test that I'm sensitive to gluten. That will not surprise you at all. And so my fallback is corn, but you turn around and like 70% of people also have challenges with corn. So, that's not much of a fallback.
No. In fact, in the plant paradox, there's a fascinating study looking at people with celiac disease it's the extreme form of gluten intolerance. And the gold standard for diagnosing celiac disease used to be a intestinal biopsy. We don't use that much anymore, but it's the gold standard. So they took people with intestinal biopsy proven celiac disease, put them on a gluten-free diet for a year and a half. 70% of them were still positive for celiac disease by intestinal biopsy following a gluten-free diet. And you go, well, how could that be? Unfortunately, most gluten-free foods are either corn or brown rice based or other lectin-heavy food. And they made the mistake of thinking that gluten is a lectin, but there are plenty of other lectins out there that'll do the same thing. The other thing that's really scary is that 95% of our corn in the United States is genetically modified. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong about genetically modified organisms, but the genetic modification in corn is called the cry protein, CRY. And sadly, when we look at food sensitivities, a huge number of my patients react to the cry protein because it's a brand new protein. We've never seen it before. And our immune system says, what the heck is this? Who is that? The other thing that we forget, and I take care of a lot of Hispanic patients living in California, and I have a lot of uh, patients who come from Central America, South America. And one of the things that's fascinating is that the Indians who developed corn always treated corn with either boiling it in lime juice or actively treating it with lye. And what that did is it did two things. It removed the hull from corn, where most of the lectins are, and it also stabilized the molecules in corn so they couldn't bind niacin, and that's a fascinating story in its own. So that was called pasole, and people always ate pasole. And then you would grind pasole. So it's called nixtamalization. And you would then grind pasole into masa harina flour. And you only made tortillas out of masa flour. And there is now a resurgence, thank goodness. There are some companies producing masa flour and even masa flour tortillas, and there's even a masa flour chip company. So it's this return of son of a gun. All of these ancient people needed sustenance. They could grow a grain that they knew was deadly to them, and yet it had calories. So how the heck do we make this work? And there it is. Okay, that's what they did. They delectinized it, right? They were really smart.
Yeah, and then modern society comes in and is so much smarter, and we should eat whole grain breads because and brown rice because
Brown rice is a classic. I mean, 4 billion people use rice as their staple. Why do 4 billion people go to the trouble of taking the hull off of rice and eating it white? I mean, how stupid is that, right?
what a waste of time unless it's not.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Why?
Absolutely. I wanted to touch one quick question before we get into our wrap up questions because our time has gone so fast here. You, I think, tend to recommend 4 to 8 ounces of animal protein, right? Like trying to keep that pretty lean. I actually put about 5 pounds of muscle mass on over the last 12 months. And my goal isn't to get like bodybuilder big. I just want to be a little bit bigger, kind of thinking about sarcopenia and aesthetics. I'm not going to lie. And that change happened not with any workout change, but literally by significantly increasing my protein. I have to admit, my LDL is higher, my cholesterol is higher. So, working to address that, I've kind of shifted more to fish. How do you think about the right amount of protein with kind of muscle mass preservation as you're thinking about putting together your diet?
I'll just refer anybody to some YouTube videos that Christopher Gardner, who's the head of nutrition at Stanford, has put out regarding protein consumption and muscle mass building, and it's a shocker. The average American consumes twice the recommended amount of protein by just eating food. Twice the recommended amount just by eating food. And there's a beautiful video where he breaks down how much protein you would have to add to your diet to add 10 pounds of muscle in a year. Now, remember, muscle is 70% water. So, seriously, it is. And so, basically, you only need to add 3 grams of protein a day to your already excessive protein intake to achieve a 10-pound muscle gain in a year. And it's well worth looking at those videos. And all I can say is this is one place for Walter Longo, and I agree that we are much overproteinized, and that if you want to live a long time, diminishing your animal protein consumption is one of the hacks to do that. Now, where he and I disagree is he says, well, yeah, but after 65, to avoid sarcopenia, you have to eat more protein because something magically happens when you're older and you need more protein. No, nothing magically happens. From our diet, we progressively destroy the absorptive surface area of our intestines. Our intestines has a surface area of a tennis court, probably 2 tennis courts. As I tell my patients, by the time you're 65, most of us now have a ping pong table for a surface area rather than a tennis court. And what I've done and shown is that I can actually cut back on my patients' protein intake and watch their total protein and their albumin go up because they seal the wall of their gut. And then they're able to increase the absorptive surface area. Plus, there's really good data that sarcopenia is caused by leaky gut and LPSs. And for any woman who's watching, osteopenia and osteoporosis is caused by leaky gut, period. And you fix the leaky gut, it goes away.
Absolutely. So let's get into some wrap-up questions. This one, hopefully we can keep it quick, but I do really like it, so I'm going to leave it in. Has anything come out of the research, like maybe like Dr. David Sinclair's work, to shift how long you think humans can live and what it might look like, in the next coming decades?
Well, I know David. I've spent some time with him. We talk on emails. I think making your mitochondria work in one way or another is one of the keys. He thinks this can be done more with pharmacologic interventions. I think it can be done with food, but supplemented intervention. So we don't disagree, but I think it does come down to mitochondrial function in so many ways.
What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets? Let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you can share. So last time it was vitamin D and time restricted eating. So maybe 2 or 3 that we would add on to that.
Well, vitamin D is number one. Yeah. So, and number 2 is time restricted eating. It's amazing. I like to follow IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor levels, as a stand-in for seeing how activated the mTOR is, the mechanistic target of rapamycin. And if you look at super old people, and I study a lot of them in my clinics and actually around the world, these people run very low insulin-like growth factors. And one of the most potent ways to lower insulin-like growth factor is time-restricted eating. It's by far the most potent. The other thing that people do not like to hear, but we show it and other people have shown it, lessening animal protein. And even a fish is an animal, even a chicken is an animal, even an egg is an animal, dramatically lowers insulin-like growth factor. Sorry about that. And I'm not a vegan. I take care of a lot of vegans because of my experience at Loma Linda. But limiting animal protein is another factor. The other factor is the more robust your microbiome, the more you are protected. One of the things that's been fascinating about these super old people is that they have a microbiome that eats xenobiotics, that eats plastics, that eats endocrine disruptors, and eats mycotoxins. And so they've got this robust defensive system that we probably all had up until we killed them off. So yeah, fostering your microbiome is the way to go, and it's harder to do than people think.
Dr. Gundry, how can people contact you?
Oh, they can find me on the Dr. Gundry podcast. We just passed the 1 million subscriber mark on our YouTube channel, which is great. drgundry.com, gundrymd.com, Instagram. Hopefully I pop up as you're scrolling every day, waving at you on the internet.
Excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
Oh, I'm just starting writing my 11th book. And I won't tell you what it's about yet, but each book.
It's about a rabbit hole, is my guess.
I just did about 10 rabbit hole dives late last night. Yeah, so there's a rabbit hole coming. Don't worry.
Excellent. So you can find him. The Dr. Gundry podcast has 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Congratulations. That's awesome. drgundry.com, gundrymd.com. Dr. Gundry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to see you again, Chris, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.